What's up guys, it's ALLDAYANTHONY, and in today's exciting video, I bought the Mona Lisa of Honda Groms. Let's go. Can you believe it? Well, you better, because we are so freaking back. This right here is quite literally the Mona Lisa of Honda Groms, and I now own this thing. So, if you're new to the channel, my name's Anthony, and I periodically make high quality YouTube content, emphasis on the periodically, but if you're not new to the channel, then you might remember me for my Honda Grom content way back in the day. Technically, the Grom content is what projected my channel in those first few years of making YouTube videos when I had my white Honda Grom. And technically, I think I've taught over 1 million people, or at least view count, on how to ride a Honda Grom as well, which is pretty freaking cool. So, the Grom stuff, something I've missed for a long time, and I am so freaking excited to be back into the saddle of one. Now, there is a lot to cover in this video. This Grom right here is absolutely the craziest Grom I have ever seen in my entire life. This isn't just the Mona Lisa of Groms, this is like a super Grom. It's like the Type R of Groms. It's something that I don't even really know how to name because this thing is just so crazily overbuilt that I don't really know how to put a label on it other than really just to call it a super Grom. Now, I'm going to briefly go over a couple of the things on this bike and talk to you about the new build, but here's the deal. There's so much in this that it really kind of deserves its own video, and I'm probably gonna have to do a separate breakdown video of every single part on this bike, because if you know anything about Groms, then you can probably point out a handful of things that are absolutely insane. Now, some of you might be wondering what happened to the white Honda Grom, and no, this is not the same bike. That's a completely separate bike. So what ended up happening was I ended up selling that to my good friend Gabe, who's a coworker of mine, a good friend. He's the one that had the silver Honda Civic EX that I featured on my channel that had really low mileage, like 30,000 miles, which was absolutely insane. And so I ended up selling it to him because I knew he was going to take care of it, and he had been wanting a Grom. So it was the bike that was getting least ridden at the time because I had actually just bought in that BMW R9T Scrambler a few years ago. I was starting to ride that a lot. The Grom really wasn't getting ridden, and so I ended up selling that to him. And I probably should have made kind of like a parting video with it, but really I knew I was going to have a Grom eventually. I didn't know when I was going to have one, so really this is just kind of the picking up from where I left off with that particular bike. And so anyways, there's a lot to cover here, so let's briefly go over what makes this a super Grom, why this thing is absolutely the most insane Grom build I've ever seen in my entire life, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about the story of how I ended up getting this thing, and then talk about some future plans. But I am beyond excited to be back in the saddle, literally on a Corbin saddle this time, which is quite nice. But yeah, we have a lot to cover in this, so let's jump to it. So jumping into this, some bare facts here. This is a 2014 Honda Grom. It's got roughly 4,000 miles on it. So what makes it so special? Well, this could be one of the last few examples in existence of a 235cc Big Bore kit on a Honda Grom. This is a factory Finbo kit, hand built with all forged internals. Now, this was something from way back in the day when people were doing the first initial Big Bore kits and trying to get as much horsepower as they could out of these small bikes, especially over in Thailand. Now, this being a 235, it makes it the probably the largest Big Bore CC example of a Big Bore kit on a Honda Grom. Probably the most common is going to be a 181. Neo kit is probably the most common, but the 235 was a possibility. Now, back in the day, this also required a standalone wiring harness and ECU from Finbo to make this happen, because again, this is making 3 times the horsepower of a standard Grom. So a standard Grom coming in at roughly 9 to 10 horsepower, this is pushing right under 30 horsepower, and trust me when I say it's freaking insane. It's absolutely wild, especially with this being essentially the stock motor housing. This motor is long gone. They are no longer in production. They are no longer in existence, which makes it a very, very rare example. To be honest, I think this is probably one of the only documented cases of a Honda Grom with a 235cc kit on YouTube. I checked, I searched, there's probably a couple of videos from like 6-7 years years ago, but this is it. This is the last example. And so what makes this awesome and scary at the same time is that, again, these are no longer in production. There's really no parts for them. Yes, you can kind of mix and match things, but this is like the perfect hand-built example of everything being internally forged and ready for power. Now, some of you might be wondering, why doesn't the 235cc Big Bore kit exist anymore, and why do they no longer produce it? Well, when they first started doing these, there was a lot of reliability issues, mainly for the fact that you're shoving so many components into the stock housing that it created a lot of heat, it created oil starvation, and then a lot of these motors were unbalanced, meaning that when things were rotating, these motors were essentially vibrating to death, causing premature failure. So what they did for this build was made sure there was plenty of oil. So there's actually an oil expansion tank here for extra oil flow. There's a 5-row oil cooler to keep things cool. And then this motor was in fact balanced properly, meaning it doesn't really have any more vibration than that of a stock 125cc Grom. So that's what makes this so freaking crazy. Now there's so many things to cover, but some obvious ones here is fully forged Finbo 235cc Big Bore kit, BST limited edition red carbon fiber wheels, over racing, rear swing arm, Olin suspension, Yoshimura exhaust. I mean, as my friend Vin says,
not a bad way to spend $10,000.
So I think that's enough talking for now. I think many of you want to see me take this thing for a rip, so we're going to throw on the helmet, take it for a spin, and I'll tell you the story about how this whole thing came about and why I now own this thing. So let's do it. All right, so it has been a minute since we've done an old school style moto vlog. I have to dust off old school Anthony for this one. So here we go, starting up the Grom, flick that, and then since it's got the bigger starter on this, it's just a quick little bump. Just like that. God, this thing looks so sick. Guys, I'm so freaking stoked to be back on a Grom. Like, I'm like beyond stoked. This makes me so freaking happy. I think we are good to go. We're at 2 bars of gas. And I think that'll be enough for this quick little stint here. Been putting 91 ethanol free in it. That's what it's tuned for, and it seems to be loving that quite a bit. But the gas mileage here on the Big Bore, significantly less gas mileage, or I guess miles per gallon than on a stock Grom. So close this. Oh my God. Dude, this puts such a big smile on my face, man. But what I wanted to do first and foremost is actually kind of go over the story of how this kind of all came about and how I ended up with the Grom here. So unfortunately, there was a few spots in this video where the audio quality got really muffled with this new mic and helmet setup that I got, and most of it was during this story about how I got the Honda Grom, so I thought I'd do a quick voiceover just summing it up. So at one point in time, I had 3 motorcycles. I had a Honda Grom, I had a Triumph Speed Triple, and a BMW Scrambler. You guys know that I ended up selling the Grom to my friend Gabe, and then I was left with 2 bikes. Well, the Triumph was a bike that I had owned for many, many years. I'd owned it for almost 10 years at this point, and I absolutely loved that bike. It was actually a dream bike for me a long time ago, and funny enough, a Speed Triple was actually the first bike that I ever learned how to ride a street bike on. And no, I don't recommend learning how to ride on a Triumph Speed Triple. However, my dad had a Speed Triple back in the day. It was a 2007, and when I was learning how to ride a motorcycle, he was very Portuguese, and he was just like, "Anthony, you're gonna learn how to ride on the Speed Triple." And I was like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Anthony, if you cannot ride this motorcycle, then you are not my son." And I'm like, "Okay." And yeah, then he was just like, "If you die on this thing, then I don't know what I'm going to tell your mother." So long story short, I ended up learning how to ride on that bike. I ended up learning how to ride really fast, and it ended up being just this absolute dream bike for me. And it was a bike that I knew that I had to have eventually. So a few years later, I ended up finding the exact Speed Triple that I wanted, one that I had seen in the showroom floor. It was a 2010 John S. Bloor Speed Triple. It was a special edition, and it was for sale locally here in Boise on Craigslist. So I ended up finding it and going and seeing it in person, and this thing was absolutely insane. It was heavily modified. It was absolutely beautiful, and the owner was super, super cool. So needless to say, I bought the Speed Triple from him and actually documented a lot of that bike in my early motovlogging days. Now, over the next several years, I would have amazing memories with that Speed Triple, along with a few speeding tickets, but just so many freaking smiles. It was just the best, most dialed in bike and the most modified bike I had really ever seen at that point. Now, what I didn't know is that me and Paul, the old owner, would actually stay in touch, mainly because I had picked up a Honda Grom, which I documented here on the channel, and he also had a Honda Grom. So what ended up happening was that we got together and started doing a ton of big group rides. So a lot of my old videos on the Honda Groms of us going up through the canyons, 20 Groms deep, having the absolute time of our lives, Paul was right there with us the entire time. Now he was on, you guessed it, this Super Grom that I'm sitting on right now. Now his Grom locally was like the god of Groms, like the Grom that all of ours aspired to be someday, because his was just so freaking fast and so crazy. So now where this all comes together is that back in the fall, I had made a garage tour video going over my garage, and I had talked about how I was potentially thinking about selling the Speed Triple. Well, Paul saw that video and reached back out to me and asked if he could buy it back. And honestly, I could think of no better person for that bike to go back to, especially considering how special it was. Now, what Paul ended up doing was offering me something that I didn't expect. He wanted to offer me his built Grom along with a little bit of cash on top in trade for the Speed Triple. And honestly, when he threw that out there, I was like smiling from ear to ear, mainly because I wanted to get back onto a Grom, but also because I knew how crazy his Grom was. Now I knew at some point I would own a Grom again, I just didn't know when, and so I thought that this was like the heavens gates opening up as the big opportunity. So needless to say, we did the trade, I got the deal. He now owns a Speed Triple, which I couldn't be happier about, and now I own this Super Grom, which is just absolutely crazy. So that's the whole story. It's a beautiful full circle thing. I'm super happy with how everything worked out, so let's just get back to riding.
This is hilarious. I'm doing 55, 60 miles an hour, and it is just absolutely eating this up. This is so much freaking fun. So for reference, I'm going about 3/4 throttle. I'm not going fully pinned on this. To be honest, I'm not truthfully geared up to go crazy on this. So the bike is pretty much capable of doing 85, 90 miles an hour, probably in the right conditions. I kind of found that 65 mile an hour is kind of the sweet spot on this, but how fast it gets to 65 is like laughable. I mean, compared to a stock Grom, that is. All right, so quick temp check here. We're at 197 degrees Fahrenheit, which is absolutely nothing. This is kind of the sweet spot I found between like 190 to 210. It seems to like to live around there, and I think that's just a big help from the 5-row oil cooler on the bike. Now temp gauge will flash at me at about 250, and that's like the hey, pull over, let this thing cool down before it starts melting itself. But I have yet to get it over like 215, and so this is kind of the sweet spot right here, and it's a little bit of a cooler day. Now one thing I'll note is that with the 235, the throttle is very twitchy, meaning that when you roll on and roll off the throttle, you'll get bucked around just a little bit, kind of back and forth. So you really have to have good throttle control with this setup. Yeah, it just kind of, again, kind of bucks you around.
So I don't know if the audio picked it up back there, but I'll just kind of reiterate that this bike loves living in that 50 to 60 mile an hour range. That's just kind of the sweet spot. It just absolutely eats it up. Whereas a stock Grom, you're kind of in that 30 to 40, right? 30 to 40 feels like the sweet spot. Being up in the 50s there, you're kind of at that top end, but like 50 to 60, it just loves it, right? And then after 60, once you get to kind of about 70-ish, again, kind of getting to that sketchy speed, that's where you're starting to be up into kind of like that 9,000-ish, 8,000 RPM range, and then taking it all the way to probably 11, 11 and a half, 12 is really when you're going to be at that top speed, completely wrung out. It's kind of sketchy, right, once you start getting up to that speed, but you still feel pretty confident on it for the most part. So needless to say, I think the Big Bore kit really addresses the biggest complaint about a Honda Grom or a small bike like this, which is the power. Because a lot of people, when they buy these bikes, they find that they don't have enough power from a safety standpoint to get themselves out of a sticky situation. So depending on where you live and how much traffic there is, you kind of need power to be able to get around and pass people. And oftentimes with the Grom, you're typically braking and trying to avoid any type of incidents or accidents versus having enough power to be able to get around that. And so this just fixes all of that. This has so much power and so much power just around town that you're able to do all of those things, which is just super, super awesome. But yeah, this thing, so freaking sick. Again, I'm going to have to make a full video with a full mod breakdown because it really does deserve that. There's just so much stuff going on this bike. All right, so this started back up. I think we're going to do one more quick rip on the back there. We're down to 1 bar, which I don't know if that's correct or not. I don't know if that's reading properly, but we'll do another quick rip, and then what I want to do is actually mic up the exhaust so you guys can actually hear the bike on all of its glory. I mean, it's a Grom, but I mean, I still think it sounds pretty good.
All right, so it is getting sweaty. I can feel it going down my neck, down my back, down my crack, and my allergies are firing off like crazy right now. All right, so let's see if we can mic up the exhaust here and get some good sound clips for you guys. Flip a little UE right here. Sorry about that, sir.
Check, check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Come around. Oh, God. That just clips right in, doesn't it? I'm going to go like something like that. So sound-wise, I think it sounds pretty good. I get some nice D-cell pops every once in a while. Truthfully, though, if I had to choose, I would say that the Zoom exhaust, I think, still sounds better than this. Now, the RS9 was one of the first exhausts that came out for the Grom way back in the day, and I think that the build quality, 100%, is significantly nicer than any of the Zoom exhausts, but the Zoom sound, I mean, dude, there's no denying that the Zoom Loop and the Zoom Brute, those things just sounded absolutely amazing. But this is pretty decent. I think I'm going to keep it mainly for the fact that it's nice. The bike's obviously tuned to have this, so I'll probably keep that around. Now, this bike does have a uni filter on it, and typically on like a stock Grom, when you throw an intake on that, you get a really nice growl from the front end, right? And it's really noticeable to hear the growl separate from the exhaust. But on this bike, there's so many noises coming from the 235 that it kind of drowns it out, so you kind of barely hear really any intake sound from it. It's mostly exhaust, it's mostly engine, and then it's mostly this damn carbon fiber rear tire hugger that I put on here that seems to be adding a lot of vibrations, which I don't really like. But I need to figure out something to do, maybe put like a grommet there or some type of like spacer or something to keep it towards a little bit quieter. But so anyways, I can talk all day, but what we're gonna do is jump back on the bike, and I want to give you guys kind of my future plans and kind of what I'm thinking for this bike, and hopefully getting some good ideas from you guys as well. So let's do it. Oh my God. Really, Anthony? Come on. It's like riding a bike, but sometimes you gotta kill it a few times to remember how to ride the bike. So go figure, as I'm editing this video, I realized that there was an entire portion of this video that got lost due to a full SD card. So I'm gonna spare you guys some more bad audio and get straight to the point with the big question, which is, what do I do next with this Honda Grom? Now, there's so many things done to this bike that it's hard to imagine anything else being tacked on, but I'm really considering going through and just doing things to make it my own. So one thing I've considered would be doing a fairing swap and doing like a full color change just to make it really ADA spec. Now, with that, I'd probably also repowder coat some of the metal bits just so it really matches that color scheme. Now on the other hand, performance-wise, the suspension on this bike is really good, but the fork internals on the front are Racetech internals, which were done way back in the day and were kind of the first run that Racetech ever made. Now with that, there's a weird clunk that happens on the front forks from time to time, which is a bit unsettling. So I'm considering revising those and dropping in some Öhlins internals just so the front could match the rear, and who knows, possibly even improve the handling. Now lastly would be the engine. The 235 in itself is beautiful because it really is the last of its kind and already has plenty more power than I really need. However, long-term reliability of the motor, who knows? It's really up in the air. So there's other options out there that I've considered doing, possibly even doing a 300 swap, a 400 swap. I'm probably not crazy enough to do a liter bike swap, but those are some other options as well for way later down the road if this motor ever does go kerplunk. So let me know what you guys think and if there's anything else that should be added to this bike or anything that I'm missing that I haven't considered. Now this next portion of the video did go missing, so we're gonna go ahead and just skip to the end.
Now, mods and ideas aside, to be honest, just looking at this thing, all I want to do is ride it. Like, just seeing this, it just makes you want to hop on and go. And I think that's just like the effect of a Honda Grom. They're just the most fun you can ever have on a motorcycle. Some of the best memories I've ever had on a bike were on a Honda Grom, and I cannot reiterate that enough. They're just so much freaking fun, regardless of power, regardless of mods and all of that. They're just an absolute blast. So I think really the answer is what I want to do is ride this thing. I want to get together with some group rides and do some massive canyon rides and things like that with another 15 or 20 Groms like we used to do back in the day, because truthfully, those were my best memories I think I've ever had on a motorcycle. Those were just so much freaking fun, and so I would like to get back into that at some point. Granted, you know, I can find the time to do it. So, all right guys, so I think it's going to wrap it up for today's video. I had a ton of fun making this. I love this bike. I love being back on a Grom, and hopefully you guys enjoy seeing a Grom back on the channel as well. So let me know your thoughts. What would you guys do with this bike? Would you make any changes, any modifications to it? Would you keep it just as is and just ride the piss out of it? Just let me know down in the comments below. So as always, if you guys love the Grom content and you guys want to see more of it, please make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe down below for more, and I'll catch you guys next one. It's ALLDAYANTHONY. Peace.